Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. My name is Drew. I'm an exercise physiologist, acupuncturist, and movement professional. I've been practicing, studying, helping, rehabbing folks for over 20 years, and particularly using functional movement and just understanding how the body is designed to create movement and then restoring and retraining people to help them recover from injury and illness and all those things. And today in this series, we're looking at the functional anatomy of the bicep muscle group. And today we're looking at brachialis, which is one of the four bicep muscles. So a little bit of confusion with biceps because bi meaning two, people tend to think there's only two bicep muscles, but there are four. So we have the muscle we're seeing here today, which is bicep brachialis, which is it's basically the preacher curl muscle. And we also have bicep brachii, which are the two that come up more into the shoulder. We have corocobrachilais, which comes off this little part of the bone here, the coracoid process. And then we also have brachioradialis, which is the long one that goes right down to the wrist. So today we're looking at this bad boy here is the bicep brachialis muscle. So as always, we look at origin and insertion first. We kind of take into consideration the line of the fibers. So when muscles contract, they're going to slide across each other and they're going to pull on both ends of the bone. So whichever end is more stabilized, the bone's going to move in the opposite direction or the opposite end. Typically, the shoulder is more stable when the arm is basically in space. So typically, the elbow will move. But however, like if you're on your hands and knees, for example, and you contract your biceps, it potentially can bring the shoulder forward because it's going to pull down like that. So potentially, you could have a shoulder movement coming forward. And we see that in shoulder flexion as well. So this muscle doesn't create shoulder flexion, but the other bicep muscles in conjunction with the deltoid do create shoulder flexion. So it would be an accessory muscle to shoulder flexion. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go into the origin insertion. So we have the proximal insertion. So here we have in the yellow is the tendon of the brachialis, and it's attaching up to basically the middle aspect of the humerus here. Now it's interesting because then the deltoid also attaches around about here. So you've got this kind of muscle on above the shoulder coming down through here. That's the deltoid, particularly the lateral branch of the deltoid muscle. And then you've got the bicep brachialis here, and they're both halfway. That's just kind of something that's interesting. And then following it down, we have the distal attachment onto this bone, which is the ulna. So it doesn't technically attach to the radius, although there will be a lot of fascial connection coming down this arm through here. But technically, the tendon attaches straight onto the ulna here on the bicep tuberosity of the ulna there. So this makes it a very simple muscle in terms of movement. It's essentially only going to do one thing, which is bicep elbow flexion or like a bicep curl. And so typically when you're doing a bicep curl, if you just keep the palm forward, thumb out and curl, typically that's more bicep brachialis here. And when you do a preacher curl, for example, you will fix your elbow typically on a bench and then just you straighten the arm out and then you flex the arm. And so when the arm is slightly flexed, it tends to take out the bicep brachii from the top. So it isolates the bicep brachialis here. So isolation of muscles is an interesting kind of concept because muscles don't really work in isolation. They work in teams or in groups and in synergies. So what you get is more of one muscle kind of probably taking the load because the line of pull and the angles are just right that muscle is going to be the one that's going to be better suited to contract and create force needed to overcome resistance of the weight or gravity or whatever it is you're trying to move against. So fairly simple. I thought I'd add in here just to check out the nerve supply. Where are we? Here we go. And we can see here when we add in the nerves, we've got this kind of in the blue, the nerves of the biceps coming out of the neck. And how we know, we just count the vertebrae. So if we go from here, that's the first vertebrae, so that's 7. So that's C7, C6, C5, and C4. And you've got the 3 nerve roots coming out of the different discs of the base of the neck there. Comes down through the brachial plexus and then innervates into the muscle belly here. And you'll find if you kind of study the trigger points, typically there are 2 trigger points in the brachialis in this region through here, similar to where you're going to get the nerve supply coming into. Not always the case, but in this one, it's kind of almost mirroring where you'll find trigger points or myofascial trigger points. So that's kind of interesting to look at. And we look again too at the space between here, we've got the clavicle and we've got the first and second rib. And so we need this space to be free. So the supply comes down through here. If, for example, your scalenes, traps, pecs get super tight, they can kind of pull the collarbone down, which then decreases the space in through here. And so you can kind of get that kind of thoracic outlet type situation or impingement. And then that has downstream effects onto the bicep muscle itself. Interestingly enough too, I was just doing some reading on myofascial trigger point therapy, and they actually were looking at rotator cuff conditions which have been stubborn, and they've had cortisone injections into the subacromial bursa, so up through here, not responsive. And so then they were doing myofascial trigger point injections into the bicep brachialis, and they were interested in see if that would change the kind of the rotator cuff pain. And in many of the patients in the study, I think there were like 70 patients in the study, it was, had some good clinical outcomes to it. So this point, I know there's a lot of massage kind of therapy students who watch these videos. Hey guys, keep up the study. You do important work. Don't forget to kind of look beyond the side of pain. So even when you're working in the side of pain and you're addressing it here, don't forget above and below. So the neck here and the elbow for the shoulder, for example, would be something you want to address. So you want to just kind of like, and when you're doing massage, one thing massage therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, osteos, physios who are hands-on manual, your tactile quality of your palpation is a really, really important tool. And after a while, you can kind of feel tissue quality, and you can kind of get a sense of, oh, this is a really knotted, this really adheres, there's lots of myofascial trigger points, there's restriction, there's like a lot of tension in the tissue, you can kind of, there's a lot of resistance, there's not a lot of pliability, there's not a lot of softness in the muscle. You get a real rich feedback through palpation, and after a while you can kind of follow the lines of the myofascial trains, the musculoskeletal trains or kinetic chains, and then figure out just by ruling out where pain might be coming from through there. So if someone's got this kind of rotator cuff problem up here, it's not responding, work your way down to the elbow, to the biceps. And because when these trigger points are active, they tend to refer pain, and then the bicep brachialis, it tends to refer pain down to the thumb region, but also up into the shoulder. So sometimes it's not necessarily the side of where the pain is. You've got to look elsewhere for it, which is super interesting. So I thought I'd just mention that. Let's have a look at motion. So I come back here. And again, we're on Complete Anatomy. It's an amazing learning tool. Link in the description below where you can find it. If you're a student of movement, I highly recommend it. It's going to be really, really helpful. And this is a really, really, really good example of muscle synergy and co-contractions. So here we have 3 muscles working together. We've got the bicep brachialis here. We've got the bicep brachii, both heads, So we have the long head and the short head here. And then we also have this forearm muscle here, which is brachioradialis, coming down to the thumb side on the radius there. So here we have elbow extension, although it's not full elbow extension. Ideally, we want to get to 90 degrees. So either this person's got super tight biceps and restriction, the muscle is so tight, it's restricting the ability of the ulnar and radius to come back into full extension. So that's one possibility, just really tight muscles on the front, weak muscles on the back, weak triceps, and or just the anatomical structure of the elbow itself, this shape here, that when the elbow itself goes into the ulnar fossa here, this kind of hole in the back of the humerus, it's just structurally goes to the end range, and we have what's called an end bone feel. So when the bone meets another bone, and you physically can't move any further than that, that's your range of movement. And no amount of stretching or mobility work or massage or all other things, it's going to be able to change that. That's your end range. So that's an important thing when we're doing movement assessment for some folks. And anatomy will often dictate what is possible. Like there's a big thing with kind of mobility and flexibility where people are trying to get, be able to do pancake and front splits and side splits and all these kind of things, which are great. They're cool movements, things to practice. But if your pelvis is, the structure of your pelvis is orientated in such a way, maybe you have a deep hip socket, or just the way that the femur is orientated in the socket, it's going to actually connect to the socket when you bring your leg out into abduction or flexion. You just anatomically can't do it. And so often a lot of end range kind of mobility and flexibility is really orientated around what are the restrictions from your skeletal structure. Because once you've stopped growing in your kind of mid-teens into your early 20s, you can't change that outside of surgery. And believe me, I've working with clients who've had like tibial osteotomies where they fracture the tibia and they separate it so they can grow bone. And these are from rehab from like car accidents and stuff like that. The actual rehab and the process of doing that is so intense and so long and so painful and just awkward. You don't want to do it if you don't have to. And for what? Like, what's the purpose of being able to do a front split or a side split? Apart from it's kind of feels great and it's cool, like that's all great. But for normal day-to-day activity, human living, it's not necessary. Okay, you need a certain range of movement, but excessive range of movements can also be a problem too. Okay, so there's my little rant. So we have the elbow flexion up to here. Now, the other part is like when your biceps are maximally contracted, they grow in size. Like you get the muscle basically grow bigger because all the fibers are sliding across each other. So from here to here, so it's just the size of the muscle gets bigger. And so the end range of movement here is not going to be how far the forearm can move towards the shoulder, but like the muscles of the forearm and the biceps actually getting in the way. So you can only bring your arm in so far. So the bigger your biceps are, you actually decrease your range of movement a little bit. Now, that's not a huge problem in terms of elbow because we want good, strong biceps, but we also want to have really good, strong triceps on the back of the arm here, which we'll get to when we do the triceps. So that's our bicep brachialis. So here we're at maximal flexion of the elbow. So when you're training this muscle, what you want to be able to do is bring the elbow into full flexion, so full bend, and think about this if you're doing rep as well. You want to focus on this eccentric component here. So you want to lower the arm down like a dumbbell, slowly with control, and that way you will lengthen out this tissue here. So one of the best ways to encourage flexibility is eccentric lengthening of tissue. So you do, for example, just a standard curl up. Okay, focusing on getting that nice contraction. Okay, and then a lower, slow release coming all the way down. And if you want to do a more of a rehabby kind of approach, so you would do a set of 8 to 10 repetitions on the curl. And then you would self-myofascial release the trigger points. So basically any adhesions, any trigger points that you can palpate, you would release those with various techniques. Then what I would do would be as like a type of PNF type stretch. So when I come up to here, so we get up to here, so we've got maximal contraction coming down. Okay. As I'm lowering down, as I'm getting down towards the bottom here, okay, to get full elbow extension, I'm going to squeeze or contract my triceps. So that'll help facilitate the muscle, because when you activate the tricep, the reciprocal inhibition will then relax the antagonist muscle group, which will be the biceps. So any kind of neurological kind of holding on that's occurring will help that to release and let go, so you can kind of start getting back to that full range. So even if you're doing like your slow eccentric lowers down and you're not really contracting your tricep, okay, you'll just basically train that muscle into that short range. Okay, all right, we want to get it into the full range where we can. So the second part of any kind of bicep rotator cuff problem here, remember a lot of rotator cuff issues are the tendon coming through here, through that biceps bruise. We must address the triceps on the back and the posterior delt and the rhomboids, so we're getting a proper whole muscle group working together. So that's another little tip you can apply. And then of course, massage therapy, you would work from the chest, anterior delt, all the way down to the little finger. There's a fascial line that basically comes up from the little finger up the ulnar side through the biceps through here. And there's a second fascial line which basically goes thumb side, radial side, and then goes into the chest. So I think kind of thumb is more like lat pull down lats, biceps, little finger is more chest. All right. So just from those kind of fascial lines as they connect together. Okay, so that is a really short one because it's a single muscle. It's not a very big muscle, but a very important muscle, bicep brachialis. Really important elbow flexor, stabilizes the elbow, particularly when playing something like that. So it's going to be very active, and it has this kind of important role on shoulder health as well, due to that kind of muscle synergy, myofascial connection, trigger point connection, referred pain connection into the shoulder. So if you've enjoyed the channel or enjoyed the video, please give me the thumbs up, the like, and the share. And if you have any other questions, please just drop a comment below, and happy to get back to you and answer them. In the next video, we'll look at probably corocobrachilais or brachioradialis, depending which one I feel like on the day. Okay, hope you're having a great day wherever you are. Keep studying, keep learning, stay healthy, and we'll see you for the next one.